right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Very excited and humbled and grateful to have Gary Wood with us today. He has more than 40 years experience leading and working with leaders in business and the nonprofit and in nonprofit environments. Over the time, he has played a part in training, developing, coaching, and encouraging hundreds of leaders, many hundreds of leaders who make significant contributions worldwide. Gary holds the Certified Master Christian Coach credential from Christian Coaches Network International and the PCC credential from the International Coach Federation, the two primary associations for professional coaching worldwide. And for those of you who are utilizing the continuing education certification, I just want to let you know that to receive that, you need to attend this session all the way through to the top of the hour and complete a survey. The link was delivered to your email inbox this morning. If you cannot locate the survey, please make sure you're accessing the correct email address, the same one that you registered with. And if you still can't find it, maybe check your spam folder, but you can also email director@christiancoaches.com, and I'll put that in the chat in just a second. Please complete the survey, and in the box for the last question, you're going to need your full name and the two-part passcode for this session. A different passcode is used every time. I'm going to share the first part of the passcode at some point, and it will not be repeated again for the rest of the session. So make sure you take the time to write that down. And then at the end, I will share the second part. And we anticipate that you will receive your certificates within a few days of the end of this boot camp. But again, if you have any questions around that, you can email director@christiancoaches.com. So without further ado, Gary Wood, thank you for being with us.
Great. Well, thanks, Jenny. This is just really an honor, everyone. And I'm just so glad to be here. Of course, we titled this Saturdays Here, but Burnout is Coming, mainly because I wanted to capture your attention and make sure I wasn't the only one here on a Saturday afternoon. No, just kidding. But actually, because burnout is not a respecter of days, as you know. Let me just give a little a word about the chat before we get going. Golly, I'm not able to do two things at once very well, so I'm afraid I am not going to be monitoring the chat. Jenny has agreed to keep her eye on it for me, and will just stop me, she'll pause me, and if there's something that I really need to address, she'll bring that to my attention. So I probably won't be looking at it directly myself. So we've got a lot to cover in this next hour, a massive amount, really, and around dealing with burnout. It's I would say, a very specialized area of coaching, and I want to give you some understanding of burnout, perhaps give you some tools, some strategy, an approach of how to work with people around dealing with burnout. It's not everyone. In fact, I actually have an opinion on that. I don't believe any and every coach should work with someone who's experiencing burnout, because it's that significant a point in someone's life. So let's just pause for a moment here. I'm going to kind of go silent. I want you to consider something on your screen before we go further. Okay. One of the things that I feel very passionate about, and it's come out of my own experience, this is not a topic that's kind of somewhere out there for me. It's very personal to me. But I'm very concerned that far too often we lose 10, 20, 30, 40 years of thought leadership and a high value contribution when a leader, an executive, a professional burns out and then drops out. And they go to something where they're just not giving that input any longer. Their experience has been bad, and we, the Christian community and society, loses out. We don't want to lose those years. And I believe coaches are really well positioned to help in this sort of a situation. So today, I want to give you an idea again of what's going on when it comes to burnout and what needs to happen. There's a difference. I make a difference, at least, between clinical burnout, right? That would be something that could be diagnosable by medical professionals, and cultural burnout. In other words, there's an interpretation that's reached by non-medical professionals. Well, who's that? That's all the rest of us. And you know how we talk about burnout generally in our culture, in our society. And I'm burned out. I can't take it anymore. I'm in burnout. So just for the record, as we go through this, I am not a medical professional. I don't have that ability to diagnose or anything like that. But for over 20 years, I have worked with men and women who are experiencing burnout. And to set a bit of a stage for this, I look at it this way, kind of in increasing intensity or increasing steps, if you like: stress, overload, burnout. And all of us are probably experiencing some background stress right at the moment. I have some stress because here I am presenting in front of a bunch of really smart people. And, that gives a level of stress. There's a timeline on the presentation. I happen to be a day where I have a headache. I've got to when I'm off this call, I've got a 5-hour trip. Some things I need to take care of for my mom. We all have background stress going on. And sometimes that stress can increase depending on those things that are going on in our lives. And it can become what I call overload. So overload, wow, it's just getting too much, right? And there's a whole lot of things going on, and you ratchet that up a bit through some of the things that we'll talk about, and you can end up experiencing burnout. And I would not be surprised, there are many of you on this call perhaps who have made a transition out of something where you just felt burned out, and you've made the transition. Here you are now. So we're going to be talking more about this idea of cultural burnout. But I do like the original definition of burnout. Really, it's as recent as 1974. I'll just read it to you. Came out by a man who coined the term, Herbert Freudenberger, and he referred to burnout this way: the extinction of motivation or incentive, especially where one's devotion to a cause or relationship fails to produce the desired results. Pretty poignant, I would say, and since 1974, it still stands pretty true today. So let me just give you then, again, a bit of an overview of burnout. I'm familiar with all of these firsthand because I've experienced them in the past. We were involved in 10 years of faith ministry. And sometimes I refer to that particular time for 25 years. We had an involvement around a particular ministry, left our careers, moved up to the area I'm currently living in. And then for 10 of those 15 years, I took over as executive director of an organization. All of these were part of my experience, particularly as time went on. We sometimes refer to it as it was the best of years. We were experiencing, by God's grace, unparalleled success. Really good things were happening. But we also called it the worst of years because nobody saw what happened behind the, what's going on behind the scenes and the strains that were there. But there are four signals really that are well documented around burnout. And the first is a loss of energy, as you see on your screen. That is a loss of physical, emotional, spiritual energy, right? That get up and go, it just isn't there anymore. And there's kind of it's almost a two-sided coin. There's a bit of a flip side to this that I find particularly in the Christian community often, and that is what I would call, you might not necessarily see the person's energy going down. If you would have talked to Gary Wood a number of years ago, boy, you'd say this guy can dance circles around anybody, who comes along in terms of work and that sort of thing. Again, by God's grace, it was almost kind of like and I don't mean I was hyper, but it was like a hyper investment of energy. I was all in, took complete ownership. So there can be this loss of energy and maybe sometimes kind of hyper energy. Or your client, the individual who's dealing with this, could have a loss of involvement. And I'll just say this, oftentimes I'll run through these four things if someone has called me and we're having a first call together and say, well, how many of those might be true for you? And they'll say, well, all four, oftentimes. So it might also be a loss of involvement. In other words, I was out there with people. You've been engaged, you've been right in there, you've been out around the water cooler or whatever it is, you're kind of fully engaged with people, but you found yourself pulling back. You're no longer involved. You're kind of sequestering yourself in your office or getting away from people, not attending things that you might normally have been attending. So there's this loss of involvement. And kind of on the other side of that flip side, there might almost be this hyper involvement. In other words, and hyper, I'm sorry, that could be the wrong term. I don't want to lead you astray on it, but you're not going to, as was certainly my case, you're not going to let something fall down on your watch. If I needed to be there, I was there. And so my involvement was kind of, it was there when it needed to be. Now, my experience was many times I was living somewhere in the future. So I always had to plan 6 months or a year down the road what people were enjoying right now, what they were appreciating right now and fully engaged in, and I might have been there with them. To a certain degree, I was already 6 months, I was thinking about something 6 months down the road. Okay, so it kind of affected my involvement. A loss of effectiveness. You're just not up to your game as much as you once were, right? You know that you're capable of better. You're not operating at your best. You're not giving it your best. Okay, and oftentimes that can show up depending on the particular sector you happen to be working in or ministry, whatever it may be. So you just don't feel as effective as you did. Golly, there may be all sorts of kind of accolades coming in, again, as was my case, kind of the flip side of that, where people were saying, this is amazing. Wow. And they didn't know that part of that is someone who's just driving themselves, who will absolutely not drop the ball on their watch. Okay. If at all possible. And then finally, this loss of a sense of health or well-being, where a signal really, someone on the edge of burnout, maybe experiencing significant overload or just on the edge of burnout or in burnout, where you're having all sorts of little health things, maybe nothing major, you know, but all sorts of kind of um, um, headaches and sore this and that, and trips to the chiropractor and rashes and you name it. There's all this kind of multiple things that seem to be happening that nobody really can kind of put their finger on and say, well, that's some serious illness or anything like that. But I don't know how many times a doctor did suggest to me, you know what, maybe this is stress. And of course, the doctor was perfectly accurate. So there it is. Cynicism can set in, can become very pessimistic, all of these signals, but there are 4 of them, okay? And you might just ask an individual, hey, is this what you're sensing? This loss of energy, involvement, effectiveness, or this sense of well-being? Jenny, anything I need to respond to there on this?
Nothing at the moment, but want to invite everyone, if at any point you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. And as we have time, we'll jump in and offer it up to Gary to respond to.
Good. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate it. So again, let me just go back and kind of reiterate this increasing level of intensity, that at least that's the way I see it. Stress, overload, burnout. So that you might expect someone's kind of talking about any one of these 4 things: energy, involvement, effectiveness, or well-being, and maybe they're saying, you know, 1 of 4, or 2 of 4, or 3 of 4, and it's kind of this rising crescendo. So pay attention to it. And absolutely, what I'm telling you when it comes to dealing with burnout, have your client pay attention to it. Don't let them skirt around this. If there are coaching skills to be used when it comes to dealing with burnout, it's to be very present with your client, and it's to give your client, although they're aware, they know there's some bad stuff going on, but to help them be very aware of a few things that we're going to look at, and then again being very direct. Don't let them skirt around these things. It's very, very important for them and for all of us.
Hey, Gary, we've got one question from Robin. She says, how do you clearly differentiate between burnout and compassion fatigue?
I don't. I do and I don't, because compassion fatigue has to do with overload, right? They're just more. There's getting more and more and more than I feel that I can handle, and I'm needing help. And compassion fatigue can actually turn into can turn into burnout. Can turn into your systems shutting down so that the caregiver is not able to provide that level of care that they really want to. Thanks, Robin. That's very real. And in fact, searchable terms around burnout, you'll find caregiver burnout right up there amongst the top few. Okay, so this is just a little picture then, just to kind of help you understand, again, what's going on. Of course, if you look at this page over on the right, you need a challenge. There's lots and lots and lots of white space, not much going on here. In fact, I think we could argue this would be a lovely title page, right? Lots of space. Well, maybe this person is under challenged. I don't know. That's not really the drawing I'm most interested in. But here's an example of someone over on the left who has some reserve. They have some margin, just like our normal books, like a normal page that you might read, right? There's some white space here. There's some space between the lines. There's some space between the words. It gives us it is appealing. It's just the way it really should be. And if we look at this example, let's say with overload, you can see that we're starting to push what we've seen over with reserves. And this is getting pretty crowded up top. It's getting mashed together. It's running out to the limits of the page. Things are starting to happen, and this is not, certainly to our eye, it's not as easy to read. It's starting to feel a little more stressful. And my example would be then with burnout. Here, look at this. And burnout is, you know what? If we type one more letter on this page, it's going to drop off the edge, right? One more word, it's dropping off the edge. This is just getting so tight that it's becoming painful. It's becoming very stressful. And that's often the case with burnout. One more thing, and it's just absolutely too much. Okay, just a little picture. Now I want to show you a Gorelli window here, and it is this. Not hard to understand at all. I just give a context first. This kind of square that's here. Remember right at the very beginning, I said all of us live within a context. There's this background stress that might be going on. And if it isn't stress, it's just called life, right? And the individual who is dealing with, let's see, when they get to this point, dealing with overload or burnout, just consider some of these things that are going on. And as I say these, I'm just going to give you some words. And as I say these words, just think, okay, what's going on in my own mind as I hear these words? And please don't kind of drop off the call here because I've given you so much stress. Okay, we want to be real about kind of the background context that any individual or leader or professional is living under. Okay, the person is experiencing all of their life experiences are going into their context, the resources that they have to draw from. People, right? You only need to say people, and that can raise the level of stress right there. Problems that they have, the support they have. I was in a situation where we had extremely little support, and it was just we just needed someone to come alongside and say, "Hey, we're with you," you know. But no one did for the most part, other than just a few people. Support. Expectations. Some of us have excruciating expectations of ourselves, or there are others who have expectations of us, right? Whether we can deliver or not is the next thing. Just life. If I just mention life, right? That's a part of our context. Church, family, teenagers, right? Whatever might be going on, extended family, right? You might be part of the sandwich generation, finances, deadlines, your inbox, commitments, schedule, downtime, personal health. Okay, you get the picture. All of these things form a context. And the question, do you have adequate resources to deal just with the background stuff that's going on, right? And if you have adequate resources, you have many resources, lots of resources, physical, emotional, social resources, and the demand on you begins going up, well, it's not so bad, right? If you've got this demand and lots of resources, you might be feeling very effective and balanced, right? Even in our coaching businesses, if we have the resources and just kind of the right amount of demand, wow, we feel in the zone. We're there. Things are going well. They feel good. But you push that very intense demand up, and we might do that for a temporary period of time, and we happen to have the resources. But what happens if the resources that we have start to lessen, or we haven't had them put in place yet. And you can see over here where there are fewer resources but high demand, we start moving up in this area of overload and burnout. Now, as I said, that's okay for a temporary period of time. If we experience renewal and we put resources back in place, maybe we're okay. But often overload goes on for a continued period of time, and we have a leader or a professional, somebody that you're working with, or perhaps the compassionate caregiver that Robin mentioned to us. And this just goes on and on and on, and the resources aren't being filled up. The well isn't being filled, if you like. The gas tank isn't being filled. You're running on less and less. Finally, you're running on empty. And it can go over from burnout or from overload into burnout, where things start to shut down. So what kind of resources might I be talking about? Many people make the mistake with burnout, and they say, oh, well, this is just about time management. They need to manage their time better. Well, that's just a bunch of baloney. It's not about time management. Time management might be part of the overall context, right? It might be part of dealing with kind of all the background stuff. Or as I've had someone say to me, in the past, they said, well, you just need a holiday. Well, it was true. Never had a holiday for a number of years. You just need a holiday. Well, that's hogwash. Because those of us who've gone through burnout, or overload into burnout, absolutely know that, a holiday isn't going to cut it. It's a way more. It's advanced to an area where a holiday isn't going to do it. You need something much more than that. So what kind of resources need to be put in place? Well, oftentimes burnout comes, right, because of this inability to influence decisions that are going to affect your work. So a resource you need is the ability to make decisions, for you to make decisions that are going to affect your own work, your tasks, your workload, your schedule. This is where the people I work with who are in, companies, corporate, or organizations, Christians as well. Oftentimes the decision making isn't under their control. That's a resource that's lacking. Or clarity about expectations. That's a resource. Being real clear about what it is that's expected of me. And so often there are unwritten expectations on a leader. And so that resource of very clear expectations is not there. And so you see what it's doing? It's pulling you down that resource axis again. Or workplace relationships. We all need workplace relationships if we're working with others. We need those relationships that lift us up, that inspire us, that are great colleagues, co-workers to be with. The dynamics of the workplace play a big role, and we need good work dynamics. So just maybe this is a word to those of you who are leaders, who lead any kind of an organization or managers. Just watch for that sort of thing. Are you creating the dynamics within the workplace that can contribute to engagement and all those things that are the opposite of overload, right? Or aligned values, right? That's a resource. Are the values of the culture where I happen to be, the organization, are they aligned with me? So you notice I'm not just mentioning things like time and money, and do I have a good desk, and do I have a good chair, and all that sort of thing. It's much more subtle, much more subjective sorts of resources that need to be in place in addition to those other things. And the last one I'll just mention here is actually a work-life balance, or life-work balance, however you want to put it. Is that actually a resource that I have in my back pocket? Is that something that's living? As one of my clients are reaching for right now, they started out wanting shalom in the home, and now they want shalom in the office, and they want shalom in their relationships in the community. It's kind of expanded. So work-life balance. That might be a good place to pause right there, Jenny.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. We've got a couple of questions. First, I want to give the first part of the passcode for your continuing education credit. So again, this will not be repeated. So make sure you write it down somewhere so you have it for your records. The first, well, I guess I should pull it up. The first part is just like the book of the Bible, 2 Timothy, the number 2 and the name Timothy. We have a question from Michael. He asked if you could say more about being direct and staying with the client.
I'm going to actually say considerably more about 2 slides ahead. Would that be okay?
Yes, absolutely. And tell me if this is the same with Tim's question of, he says, deep disappointment due to unmet expectations. How often have you seen this in combination with clients?
Oh man, just about every week. I really thought I was going to be able to make a contribution here, but I find out that there's a hidden agenda going on. The board has an agenda, really. The owner of this organization who brought me in has an agenda that really isn't the one that he or she told me it was. And that's, it's deeply disappointing when we find ourselves, we're already in this far. And yet we find these things at work, and we kind of come to the realization, you know what, I had hopes and dreams I had something to offer here, and I'm not really sure that it's going to be received or that it's going to be able to get put in place. Does that tackle it?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
So it's prevalent. Okay.
Yep, that's it for now.
Good. So I want to mention just a few things, what your client needs to know from you immediately. And again, that's what I say, this coaching is not for everyone. It's kind of I would say, a specialized area of coaching. I'm not trying to say that to keep you out of the area or anything like that. It's just that we're dealing with an absolutely very crucial time in the life of this particular professional. And again, I want to put some stress on the fact that this is not about time management, or it's not about putting in too many hours, right? That's not what it's about. It goes way beyond this. This individual feels like they have lost the control. They don't have a control over those things that they've been tasked with achieving. Somebody else is pulling some strings or laying some heavy-duty expectations on them. And it's just really, really tough to navigate that. That just sucks the life right out of you. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. I would imagine many of you have been there. So what to emphasize when this particular client comes along? Number one, I want to put emphasis on, there is hope. If there's anything that you and I need to give this client, it is that they are hope. Because in all honesty, and the more intense this feels before they've contacted you, they just begin to feel like this is hopeless. They don't feel very good about their future prospects at this organization or in this company, or wherever it may be, and where they thought that they had something to offer. They're already eyeing up a job wherever, but certainly not with thought contribution involved in it. So there is hope, and there is a way forward. Right? We need to emphasize that you don't need to stay here. You don't have to stay here. This is not impossible. There is a way forward. And we've had some excellent presentations. Unfortunately, I only got in on the last two here today. I was working the last couple days, but in the presentation, I think it was with Chad that we just had, that in fact we can give our clients some structure to show them there's a way to navigate through this. There is a way forward. The other thing that I'd mention is that they are valuable. This is really a time to emphasize that. And now we're getting into our direct, communication to a client. There is hope. There is a way forward. They are valuable. I run a little straw poll with, and I've done that now with over 20 years worth of coaching with clients experiencing overload and burnout. And I will tell you that probably 80% of my clients are Christian clients. And these are Christian clients who, for the most part, they know their Bible. Okay, they know the language. They know what to say, and I will ask them a closed-ended question very early on, probably before we even get working together, because I'm interested in knowing. I will ask them, do you feel valuable? And you know what my straw poll is now in 20 years of doing this? Probably 80% of Christian clients will tell me they do not feel valuable. How's that for a downer statement? So I need to ask permission of them and kind of get up on a stump and say, may I share something with you? And this is exactly what I share. And it really is deeply from the scriptures. I said, there are only two reasons in the world that you feel valuable, and that you are valuable, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your work. It has absolutely nothing to do with any of your background or any what's going on, your boss, nothing, none of that. The reasons you are valuable is because you are created in the image of God. And the second reason that you are valuable is that for you and you alone, the Lord Jesus Christ was willing to come to this earth and go to a cross for you. That makes you a somebody. That makes you the most important person in this world. You are valuable. And if nothing else, you need to go away from this call and remember that. And that often becomes something where they say, you know what, I want to work with you. That's huge to get into somebody's mind and heart. Okay, and of course the last thing is want to say, well, we can get through this. Not only is there a way forward, but we can get through this. And you might need to ask the question then, a very, very strong question, right? How willing are you to let God radically take care of you? Again, if that's a Christian client who has given you permission to bring these things into the conversation. Or put another way, how willing are you to yield to God, right? So that God can use you to take care of you. Major, right? That's major. Am I willing? Am I willing to give, or am I too busy? I don't have time. Sorry, I don't have time to let God get involved in this. I'm too busy. I'm too important. There's too much going on. They can't do without me. This work will collapse if I'm not there. Sorry. Anyway, you get the question. I'm being a little facetious, but and perhaps then as we get going, there's no greater form of direct communication than saying stop. And there are probably a whole lot of my clients, the majority I would say, where at some point in time, I have to say to them, stop. You cannot keep going on like this. If this has to do with overload and burnout, I'm going to make a very big request of you. And if obviously as clients, if we make a request, they can accept it, they can decline it, they can modify it. But I'm going to request before this week is out that you get out of as many obligations and commitments that you possibly can. You need to clear up some space. You need to get some time so that you can think this through, so that you can begin to renew and refresh. You need to get some time so that you can come up with some strategy for moving forward. And I'm sorry if you're involved in all sorts of very, very good things, right? Maybe the home Bible study and you know, whatever it might be. Your small group. You may need to let that go, or maybe other commitments that you have. And you sometimes need to be very, very bold with a person who's experiencing some significant overload or burnout, right? As I say, you sometimes just have to step in there, and it's okay if they say no. The client knows what if you put it in front of them, they have that ability to say, well, no, I don't feel I can do that, but I could do this. Super, great. Whatever serves you. And if you see that they're in alignment with moving forward in a good way, that's great. So sometimes it's being very direct. Why? Because these individuals are highly committed, right? They're highly involved. They're highly looked to, respected. Eyes turn to them oftentimes to say, well, what are we going to do? They're looking to them for advice. And so you have to kind of get them to almost stop those things taking place. Okay, I know I'm moving along here. I hope you're following with me. I'm sorry it's coming kind of like a fire hose. So why do we put off taking action? Very important to know there probably, there could be a good 10, 15 reasons behind this. There are a number, but I've captured just a few, just 5 of them to kind of give you the taste of that. The individual you're working with might not take action because they worry about what others will think, right? And boy, that's powerful. How often do we find ourselves performing for people, managing our image for other people? And so even when we are going down, 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 and we sense this is not a good situation that I'm in, we keep going because we wonder what others will think of us, right? Or we don't want to face what might come up. Wow, they're going to see me as I truly am, right? Or this may involve, and just I'll give you a little bit of background to this. So it's very hard for me to have an organization sponsor the person that they're burning out. Why? Because the person comes privately, right? They want to pay for coaching privately. Why? Because they don't want their organization. They don't want their board. They don't want those who they report to knowing the significant stress that they happen to be under. right? So they don't want to face what might be coming up. Who knows if someone hauls them on the carpet, or they're not, they can't make the cut. They're not up to it. They're they're wimping out, and or it might show that there are some things in their own lives that they really need to face up to, right? Kind of all that other stuff, that background context that we talked about might come up, that in fact they really don't know how to manage their time. Something as simple as that. And that's the flip side of dealing with burnout. It's actually increasing personal effectiveness and productivity, not letting it drop, because many of these people have to keep producing even when they're feeling the way they do. So we put off taking action because we hope it will just go away. Maybe if I wait long enough, this will all be gone. Well, it won't. Or we believe there may be no solutions. I'm stuck. Some people actually believe there are no solutions to this. Well, there are, right? And we need to emphasize that. Or, as I referred to earlier, they put off taking action because our value is determined by our work. We've misplaced those things that determine our personal value, right? And so it's kind of like the most read blog piece when I was blogging that where I ever got the most response. And it was a blog that I wrote about how we all go around wearing the badge of busy, and how I was going to take the word busy out of my vocabulary. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm busy. You should hear all the things that I'm involved in. So busy, right? Our work is determined by our value. Well, that's a load of poppycock, right? We need to get away from that. Yet our culture kind of pushes us into this. So let's just move forward and see a reality that's taking place here. And then I kind of want to head for a summary. A bit of a reality check. You remember in 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day, he rested, right? God has rhythm. It's a beautiful rhythm. It's intensity, rest, intensity, rest, intensity, rest. Kind of like this blue, light blue sine wave that you see, intensity, rest. And we're designed to come down to a point of rest so that the adrenaline stops flowing, so that whatever other good things take place in our brain and our body that others of you know much better than me and could expound on, everything kind of comes down, relax, renew, regroup, right? Have a life. We were designed this way. Yet our modern culture seems to push us to this red dotted line, where this line that used to be rest is actually up here, and it's not rest at all. So we don't have real recovery. We're checking our phone. I mean, it's a blessing, but it's also a curse. We're sitting there at 9 o'clock at night, checking our phone, responding to email. We've brought work home. And especially those of us who have home offices, we're on this project that just can't wait. There's no recovery. And this is what happens. We can do it for a while, but eventually slam, right? You're going to find yourself down there. You'll find it for health reasons or whatever. You'll find it like Gary Wood. I was out buying about $1,200 worth of candy for a candy shop at the time, and all of a sudden I started having tingling going up my arms, my legs. My heart was racing. I thought I was having a heart attack. This huge warehouse building started closing in on me, and I felt like I was claustrophobic. I was sure I was having a heart attack. Bam. You land in the hospital, you'll understand that it's time to start start taking action, right? And productivity in this case, wow, this person's really producing, really putting it out there, but slam, productivity goes right down to nothing. And maybe this period ends up being that period of what, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of thought leadership that I referred to. And we as a society, we as the Christian community lose out on it. Intensity, rest, intensity, rest. Okay, let's pay attention to it. Just to give you kind of in summary, a bit of a picture. So we got this teeter-totter, right? And all of this demand. We have too much demand and too little of the resources. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to lessen the demand, right? If you're going to move forward, we're going to need to reduce that demand. Or alternately, if you refuse to reduce the demand, you for sure better increase the resources. Something has to happen here. That's just a simple picture to show you when you're working with your client, one of those things absolutely needs to take place. The last thing I'll mention is that I can tell you that one of 5 things are going to need to take place for this client. And you can check it out. They're going to have to set some new outcomes for themselves, right? They've got to readjust the target that they're reaching for, or think of it in new ways. They're going to have to, this will be, one of these 5 things will be the next thing that they need to concentrate on. They may need to get real clear about something. Real clear about what determines their value, real clear about whether they really want to keep doing this or not. They may need to take ownership of something. I need to take ownership of changing roles. I need to take ownership of delegating. I need to take ownership of taking that help that has been offered to me. I need to take ownership of reaching out for help. They may need to put structure in place, right? Some sort of organizational structure. And they may need some just momentum. Look, you know what to do. Now you need to hit the start button. Start doing it. I can guarantee you one of those 5 things. So here's the summary for this particular client. Take responsibility. Create intentional time to think. Determine the outcomes you want. What do you really want out of life here at this juncture? Create a strategy. Create a supportive structure. Take daily decisive action until this new way of working becomes a habit. And persevere and adjust until you are consistent. And with that, I'm going to finish. I'll just go back and mention this. This is the clarity and momentum structure framework right here. You can learn more about that. And this is my little plug at actionplanachiever.com. Okay. Jenny, let me turn it back to you. We have a few minutes left. I know that was kind of the fire hose version here. And I see a lot of chatting that's been going on.
Yeah, excellent. So Sherry, this kind of ties in really with the information you just shared, but maybe you have some extra. What recommendations would you give to someone who is starting a ministry to establish it in a way where they're less likely to experience burnout?
Yeah, let the body do its work. And if the body isn't doing its work, please take it upon yourself to help them do the work the body should be doing. Right? So I had a board of directors. I'm thinking of one organization I was with where a lot of this unfolded. I had a board of directors who didn't understand, didn't know, never mind understand, they didn't know what was going on. and they never asked. And anytime after that, in that sort of a situation, I had to train people, you know what, ask. There are things to ask your executive director. There are things to ask those people in companies as well, so that you're understanding where they're at. That's the biggest response. And then of course you're taking care of yourself, right? You're spending those consistent times with the Lord every day. Anyway, you know all that piece, but the biggest is, I would say, let the body or help the body to do its work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you are a leader, I assume you're not a leader alone. And you ought not to bear the whole responsibility yourself. If there are others involved, they jointly with you bear responsibility.
And Amanda is asking, what about burnout with recurring sin? Or maybe the burnout is a symptom of sin. How would you handle a situation like that?
Ooh, well, we're into another their sin. If it's their sin, we're into another ball game, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it depends. Is it going to come up during the coaching, right? Or am I going to detect something that perhaps needs to be again some very direct language? Is there something going on here, or what's going on that's affecting this? What's going on that you don't want to talk about, but it's standing in the way of us coming to some, or of you coming to some solutions? That's a big one right there.
Mm-hmm. Kristen is tying this to Chad's session. You mentioned that you attended his, and she's asking, would this coaching style fall under framework rather than familiarity or formula?
I actually do have a framework for working with the clients that I work with. And obviously the first part of that framework kind of stands all by itself. It's prevention. I'd much rather work with an individual, certainly maybe they're experiencing some overload, but I'd much rather work with them then and prevent burnout from happening. So that's the first. But if a person does come and they're experiencing burnout, I actually do have a framework, and it goes resolution, transition, continuity. In other words, resolution. Let's get some immediate things taken care of. You cannot go on one more day like this. You cannot go on one more week like this. There are some things that need to happen now, right? That's resolution. Transition is, let's start putting some strategies in place, some new strategies that you're going to be able to embrace, start turning into habits, and start implementing those. And then continuity, hopefully, obviously, would be, okay, let's make sure those strategies are implemented, they're taking place, you're moving forward in a whole healthy new way over the months, the quarter, the year, that there's some continuity to it. So I would say framework.
So in that type of situation, is it most helpful to begin in a presenting mode more than a powerful question mode?
No. I'll begin where my client begins.
Mm-hmm.
But in the context of saying there is a way forward, I will show the client resolution, transition, continuity, and I will encourage them that I will be alongside them, that there is hope. We'll walk through this together, and I'll help them move through this. So I begin where they begin. It's not a time for training. It's a time for zeroing in exactly where they're at and getting some immediate clarity about what's going on and what's needed for that situation.
Okay, thank you. We're at the top of the hour. We've got one more question that we are going to get to, but for those of you that need to go, I want to go ahead and give the second part of the passcode. And again, just like a scripture verse, this is 3:16. So the number 3, a colon, and the numbers 1, 6, 3:16. Okay, the final question that we have, unless people want to add more in, is how often would you say burnout and transition go hand in hand?
Burnout and transition. So I'm going to make an assumption, and that is that what you are referring to is that how often does this person transition out of the situation they happen to be in, the context they happen to be in, the job, the function, whatever it may be, and actually say, you know what, I think I've come to the conclusion, I'm out of here, I'm going to go on to something else. They change jobs, they resign, whatever it may be. And I would say probably 60 or 70% they stay right where they are. 30 to 40% they transition out to something else. And hopefully, maybe I put too much pressure on myself, but hopefully, if by God's grace I've done my job well, hopefully they don't transition out of still being a contributor, still being a thought leader. They may take a period of regrouping, of recovering, and I'll track them over that time, but they get back in doing something else, perhaps with the background context being different, somewhere where there's more support or whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Patty says some of your definition of burnout could also be signs that you're in transition. So I think she's asking, like, how, when do you know that this is just transition, there's a lot going on, versus this person is actually experiencing burnout?
Yeah. So there'd be another piece here, really. Right. Are we talking about kind of the background context, right? What do I really need to be of assistance to you around? What's the real thing going on? Is this something to do with process or time management or knowing how to have those tough conversations with a few people in the office, or what is it all about? And you've put it in the terms of I'm burned out, I'm ready to be out of here. So if I understand you correctly, and maybe I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, right? We may find out, oh, okay, let's deal with some of these other things. Let's give some tools, some strategies, think the situation through, versus kind of elevating this kind of to the level of burnout. Maybe there are some other things really to look at here.
Yes, Patty says that was helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's all the questions we have. Gary, thank you so much for this time and sharing with us. It was incredibly helpful. We'd love, if you guys, I don't know if you want to do like highlights, if you guys want to share in the chat, just what really stood out to you about this time, what was helpful about this session. We'd love to see that feedback as we say our goodbyes. And I want to draw your attention to Kelly's post that Cheryl Scanlon is going to be with us at 5:30 Eastern. So I'd love to have you guys back for that. And as a reminder, an email is going to be sent out once all the recordings are uploaded and ready to go. We anticipate this will be done within 72 hours. So you'll have access to all of those recordings. And if you have any questions about continuing education credits and how to get those, you can simply email melody@director@christiancoaches.com. Thank you, Gary, so much.
Super. You are welcome. What an honor to work with everyone. Just lovely, lovely. The Lord bless you.
Bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you back here